I'm Haley Taylor, and you're listening to the Rough Draft Diaries. We finished the last episode of the Rough Draft Diaries with something of a cliffhanger, so we'll have to hit the ground running to catch you up if you missed out on the previous episode. Dr. Jeff Reutter, a scientist who studies issues surrounding Lake Erie, was on the program. He came to study environmental biology at a time when Lake Erie was labeled a dead lake. This is the late 60s, early 70s. Too much phosphorus was being washed into the lake. This came from sewage treatment plants and septic tanks. Warm water plus a large amount of phosphorus equals a large amount of algal blooms, which are toxic. But this problem was solved. In 1970, the EPA, the Environment Protection Agency, was created, and in 1972, amendments were created for the Clean Water Act. So by the mid-80s, the level of phosphorus was going down, and the algal blooms seemed to go down as well. The lake bounced back, and everything seemed like it was back to normal until August 2nd of 2014.
8 o'clock Saturday morning, my telephone started ringing. The first call, Ohio EPA and US EPA. About 8:10, 10 minutes later, a call from Senator Portman. Then a call from Congresswoman Capter's office. And about 2 minutes later, a call from Congressman Latta's office and the city of Toledo. And so it was a very, very busy time.
It was the water ban of 2014, where Toledoans and nearby counties could not drink the tap water for about 3 days. Strong winds and heavy wave patterns caused a small but toxic algal bloom to form directly over Toledo's water intake pipe. Now, Toledo only has one intake pipe, so once it's in the pipes, it's coming out of the taps, and it's, again, toxic water. The water ban was a surprise for Dr. Reutter. It was not detected at Stone Lab, and it was nowhere near the intake pipes the night before. But the idea that Lake Erie's water could become toxic was nothing new to Dr. Reutter.
It was pretty easy for me to show people how Lake Erie had gotten worse every year. Between 70 and 75, we stabilized things. From 75 to 95, the lake improved just about every year. And since 1995, we've been going in the wrong direction. It's been getting worse.
But the amendments from the Clean Water Act from 1972 are still in place. Septic tanks and sewage water treatment plants are still under regulation. So, what caused these algal blooms?
When you look at the phosphorus that comes out of the Maumee River, about 85% of that is coming from agricultural land. We can't solve the problem simply by working with sewage treatment plants and septic tanks because the load from those two sources is less than 15%. And the load from agricultural activities, that's where we have to focus our effort.
So what do farmers have to do with the algal blooms? Well, the blooms are caused in part by trends in agricultural practices, such as the fertilizer that is used on these farms and the amount that is used. But mainly, the blooms stem from an increased intensity in precipitation.
Because of climate change, we're seeing a 53% increase in the frequency of severe storms. When you think about it, in the case of agricultural runoff, when it's not raining, there's no phosphorus going in from agriculture. When you get a gentle rain, the water soaks in. When you get a gully washer, the water goes off the surface and is the kind of phosphorus that causes these harmful algal blooms. And we didn't know that. 10 years ago, we didn't know that. So this is new information.
So what does one do with all this new information? Well, this is where it gets a little tricky. Dr. Reutter mentioned early on agricultural leaders thought any changes made to agricultural practices would have to be made voluntarily. And some Northwest Ohio farmers did change their practices, but not all of them. And this is the tricky part. How do you persuade just over 1/3 of Northwest Ohio farmers to completely change how their farm operates? Well, Dr. Reutter has some ideas.
The farmers have to do it voluntarily, or we have to create incentives to pay the farmers to take the appropriate actions, or we have to create regulations and make them do the right things. This is critically important because there's a bill in front of Congress right now. It's H.R. 861 that would eliminate U.S. EPA. And if we lose EPA and we lose the Clean Water Act, then we're also going to lose Lake Erie.
So where is the silver lining in this story? Is there one? Well, actually, there is. Jeff Reutter, the man who was a part of the team who helped solve the same issue 47 years ago, feels like we can fix this problem.
Think that you have about 11 million people getting their drinking water, somewhere between 11 and 14 million people getting their drinking water from Lake Erie every day. You have the largest fishery of all the Great Lakes, incredibly important to human health, incredibly important to the economy. It's incredibly important to our lifestyles. The only way we solve this is by reducing phosphorus. This is not a negotiable thing. Either we do it or we don't. It's very much achievable. And recognize that in the 60s, the reduction that we had to achieve was a 60% reduction. We did it. Now we have to get a 40% reduction. The difference is in the 60s, we were focused on about 10 sewage treatment plants. Today, we're focused on about 15,000 farmers. I think it's a heavy lift. It's a big challenge, but I think it can be accomplished.
I'm Haley Taylor, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Rough Draft Diaries. Dr. Reutter's choices for the next episode of the Rough Draft Diaries include...
You could talk to a charter captain, and I would suggest Dave Spangler. Obviously, you could talk to a farmer. A discussion with Marcy Capter in your area would definitely be good.
You'll have to tune in next time to find out who I pick. That's the Rough Draft Diaries, Wednesday mornings at 7:45 on FM 91.